What is going on with the car design these days? I mean, I feel like a broken record every time a new car comes out because 95% of the cases, I just don't think that we're moving in the right direction when it comes to car design. It's as simple as that. I don't care if it makes me old school or, not adjusting to trends that we have today, but that's just my opinion, and that is why I have this YouTube channel to share my opinions. And here we have the 2025, maybe it's the 2026, I'm not sure, 2025 Volkswagen Tiguan. And I don't know what happened here with this design. I mean, you tell me. Look at these two designs that we have here. The previous Tiguan compared to the new one. And do you think that the new one is an improvement over the old one? Personally, to me, it's a clear no. It's not an improvement over the old one. The new one with the front end, massive mouth in the lower section, blacked out section, the entire bumper, tiny little small headlights up top, and the proportions relationship between these two just don't work for me at all. But there are some good news with the new Tiguan here. It's not all negative. Okay, I'm gonna try to be a little bit positive in this video. Find the silver lining here of these two cars. So before we jump into Photoshop and compare the old Tiguan to the new one, let's have a look at what's going on with the spec and tech here with this article from Car and Driver. So 2025 Volkswagen Tiguan drops the third row and adds power. They also say that it has a classier interior with a fresh infotainment system here. So now the engine makes 201 horsepower. More power is welcome, but its weight savings of 170 pounds is even more impressive. And that is probably because they don't have to fiddle around with the mechanics and the engineering for the third row, would be my guess. The new infotainment system is shared with the ID Buzz. The Tiguan is the product that keeps the lights on for Volkswagen. This is a very, 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 very important model for Volkswagen, so they need to get this right. Its enormous importance cannot be overstated. Last year, the Tiguan was the leading Volkswagen product globally, outselling the Golf nearly 2-1. Now we have a fractionally longer wheelbase than before, and it's not really looking like EV proportions, but it's starting to get there, specifically with this soft styling that we have as well. So a little bit of a longer wheelbase, shorter overhangs front and rear, which is sort of the textbook for EV proportions. So 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder now makes 201 horsepower, which is up from 184. So a pretty substantial, 15 horsepower more, 16, 17, something like that. Not bad, it's always welcome. And also mix that with the weight reduction of 170 pounds. And it should be a pretty spicy car to drive, this thing. Not sure if it's spicy, but 201 horsepower, pretty fun car SUV to drive, I guess. So Volkswagen has chosen to delete the third row option for this new model, but is offered fairly cramped quarters anyway. So it wasn't, the Tiguan is not a big SUV, so slapping 3 rows in there, the third row is not going to be very, very usable for adults specifically. So we don't have any dimensions for the second row, but it looks to be a lot of legroom in here. No problems at all fitting back there. Interior, which was pretty humdrum in the old Tiguan, has been reworked to feel a little bit more Audi-like. There's more space between the seats thanks to moving the gear selector to the steering column. That is also a trend that seems to be happening all over the automotive industry, to not have a proper gear selector. Instead, we just have this steering column shifter. The material used in the higher trim models look great, and there's of course a big high-resolution 15-inch touchscreen on the dash. Standard models gets a 12.9-inch screen. I will go for the 12.9. I think 15 inches in this one is just too big for me personally. Volkswagen added some fun touches such as selectable audio and interior lighting settings called Atmosphere. So you have a rotary knob that adjusts these atmospheres. It sits in between the seats, and I guess it changes up the ambient lighting and just whatever atmosphere you want to feel like you're sitting in. You can change that with this rotary dial, which also controls the stereo volume and drive mode settings. You have features such as wireless charging for smartphones and 2-zone automatic climate control. Safety standards are solid too, which with the forward collision mitigation, lane keep and assist, and parking sensors. Level 2 driving assist is also standard now. Not bad at all. The premium audio offers a 12-speaker Harman Kardon system. There are quilted leather seats with ventilation and also massage. In a Tiguan, these are obviously options that you can add to this. And to impress from the curb, the largest wheel size is 20 inches, which is, again, as usual when it comes to these SUVs, that nobody's ever going to take off-road anyway. I would probably go with the 20 inches just to fill out the wheelhouses properly. The Tiguan name is meant to signify both tiger and iguana. So a mixed Tiguana, I guess it should have been the proper name. And with a bigger grille now, it kind of looks a bit like an angry cat lizard up front. And we're going to look at that in detail in a minute when we jump into Photoshop here. So if the infotainment is notably improved, this should still be a solid product. I'm not sure how many people, buyers of Tiguan, really cares about, design. I think they just want great value and great interior space and features. And if that's what you're looking for, the Tiguan for 2025 is still going to be a very, very good car. So Volkswagen's push into EV will likely face some headwinds in the near future, at least in the US market. In the meantime, dealers and customers will be happy to see that Volkswagen appears to have taken updating the Tiguan with the seriousness that its sales figures deserve. Now, let's jump into Photoshop here and have a look at this design. And I mean, the old one just looks so... the front face of the old one looks so nice. It is such a stately, classy front end. And look at the relationship here. This is the old one, 2022, maybe they came out. So look at the relationship between these graphics up here. You can see how it dips down here, creates a solid looking bumper and solid separation in this area between the top half graphics, which we've talked so much about before, and the lower half graphics. And this one I do believe is the R design right here, meaning that we do have a much more aggressive spoiler down or intakes bumper down low. But it looks great, doesn't it? It just feels like these two features, the lower section here and the top section, they balance each other out nicely when it comes to the real estate that it takes up in the front end. I also like that this LED here, for example, this one right here connects to this bar. Not sure if this is was this a light bar in the previous generation? It looks like it's lit up here, so that's pretty cool. Something that Volkswagen is doing in pretty much every single model these days, which is totally fine to me. I don't mind about that at all. But comparing this now to the new one, and what happened here? Like, why does everything have to be so vulgar today? And lack of identity, just removing everything that made the brand special. That's what I feel like is happening across the entire board today. I mean, look at the relationship here now between the lower section right here and how massive this is. What's going on here, Volkswagen? Why did you do this? And then you have a very small, tiny little eyelids or eyeballs up here in a very interesting design, outline for it. Super simplistic. This looks like an EV to me from Volkswagen. And I've never been a fan of the ID designs, except for the new ID GTI, I think it's called, which is... I wish they just put a 4-cylinder and a manual transmission with all-wheel drive on that one and made it the new Golf R. That would be so cool, because that is a design that I love. But the rest of the ID lineup looks too bubbly to me. It looks too soft and rounded. And Volkswagen is supposed to be stately, static, and just all business. That is what Volkswagen is when it comes to design. This looks like a mix between their internal combustion engine designs and an ID design. As you can probably tell, I'm not a fan of the front end here. This is just too grotesque. This intake at the lower section, I don't understand why they made it this tall and just a big black hole in the front end, instead of just cutting this a little lower than this and then increase the size of the top graphics to, again, have the same balance that we had in the previous model. But not everything, as I said, is completely bad here. The side view, look at the side view. This looks like a BMW X5 to me, specifically with this line, the shoulder line that goes right here and then has this upward swing right over the rear axle. This is 100% BMW X5. You have the sloping roofline here as well. And you can see that Volkswagen is trying to be something that they're really not, and that is more South Korean styling with all these lines and curvatures that we haven't seen from Volkswagen in ever, I think. Because to me, this is not what Volkswagen is supposed to be. Again, coming back to the stateliness that we used to have in Volkswagen. Look at these straight lines everywhere here, some carved out portions. I wasn't really a fan of this shoulder line. I think it's too aggressive of a carved out portion for the shoulder line, but you can see just how everything is static and very clean going into the bumper here. We have a clean chamfer in the rear end, clean roof line as well, and very, very structured design for the previous generation of the Tiguan. And that is what I think personally is the core identity of Volkswagen. And that is also what the designers told us as car design students back in 2009, that is in fact what Volkswagen is all about. I've said it before, but every single line on a Volkswagen needs to have a purpose, and it's not about overstyling. And I think for Volkswagen standard, this is starting to become a little bit over-stylized. Now looking at the rear end, again, the structure just comes back in the previous generation. I do believe these are fake exhaust pipes. Yes, they look to be covered up here, which is a shame. I would love to see these be functional in the previous generation. You also have this typical German waterfall design into the bumper from the key graphics here, and then just flows right into this beautiful chamfer, creating a nice separation from the top half graphics to the proper bumper in the rear. I want to reintroduce more proper bumpers in the rear and the front of cars. But this is a beautiful looking rear end. The new one has these graphic features again that we have in the front end, these black pieces in the lower section, and by having these dipping down all the way to this area, this low in the rear end, thankfully we do have a nice chamfer going around it, so that's a positive. But for example, look at the distance here from the taillight and all the way how this waterfall now really becomes a waterfall, because this distance here is much higher than what we had here. This looks way more sporty and way more solid than the new generation that we have here. And as I said, this graphic black piece going all the way down here is pulling the design down to the ground and making that lower bumper feel heavy. This is a completely unnecessary graphic here, because you can see everything is just covered up. It's just for styling purposes. But I don't think it's a good idea to add this piece in the back of the new Tiguan, and also reduce this height here between the top half, between the key graphics, which are the taillights here, and the bumper in the lower section. We have these interesting new styling curvatures and lines going in here in the rear end, as well as we have all over the car in the side views we just talked about. Very static looking LEDs inside of the taillight here. The taillight section by itself, it would just separate this unit from the rest of everything that goes on here. It doesn't look too bad. This is sort of what Volkswagen is about, to have this very simple graphics, and I do think these taillights look pretty good, but the overall relationship between the key graphics in the rear and just gives me a headache when I look at it, because nothing feels proportionally correct like it did in the previous generation Tiguan. So if I were to buy one of these, I would definitely go with the previous generation Tiguan, and that goes for the interior as well. Some people said that this previous generation Tiguan interior was too boring, and nothing really going on here. But again, it's a Volkswagen. It's a car for the people. It's not supposed to be shouty or flashy or anything like. It's supposed to be 100% almost functionality in a Volkswagen, and that is what I think this interior did really well. We have this Audi situation here where you have the full gauge cluster being completely digital. You can have the entire map, you can customize it and do whatever you want with it. Looking great, and beautiful integration going into these vents here that then wraps around. As you can see, the outline of the vents then continues and creates the framing for the infotainment screen, which is a proper size. We don't need a big screen up here like we have on every single car these days. This is totally fine. I don't understand why we need to keep bumping up the screen sizes for interiors. Just no reason for it whatsoever, in my opinion. So further down here, again, separated the controls for the climate settings, beautifully done, even though I'm not a huge fan of these slider buttons. I would much rather have a dial to control the temperature. Look at this, beautiful gear selector down low with some functionality buttons on the side of it. Drive mode dial down there, very sturdy looking. Now looking at the new one, this is not a bad looking interior. I mean, it looks very classy and almost luxurious style. I definitely prefer this interior over what Audi is doing by having this dual screen setup now in pretty much every single new model. It looks like we do have a cap for the gauge cluster here, which is fantastic, and that the gauge cluster sits a little deeper in the dash. While this screen to me looks to be, what did it say, like 15 something screen or 14 inch. This is too big for me. I want to shrink this down and have this be in line with the top of the dash. I don't want it to stick up this piece right here. Instead, have it be in line with the rest of the dash, and also probably in the lower section. I don't necessarily need it to stick out down here. We can remove this piece, shrink the graphics down, and just have a wider infotainment screen. But this area here looks very nice. The textures, the wood material, the brushed aluminum that we have here looks super classy as well. And here you have this dial for your atmospheres. So this looks to be maybe a fall atmosphere or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. But it looks very warm and very welcoming still for a brand new Volkswagen in 2025. So let me know what you think about this. Am I completely wrong here with thinking that most car brands are just removing their identity? And I feel like a lot of car companies and designers today, they're sort of lost. They don't know what direction they want to take the brand. It feels like they just they have this compulsion to create something completely different, and that creates a very confused lineup for most of car companies today. That's at least what I think. I want to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. And again, if I were to buy one of these, I would definitely look at used Tiguan's, slightly used, lower mileage, and also that would save myself a lot of money, and it would give me a proper, specifically exterior design.